Pawpaw was quick to pick up on this one. But from then on, I was Megan, but I was okay with it because at least then I wasn't the pot whistler anymore. And then later came the fishing trips. Porter Connor will always be Pawpaw's fishing spot in my mind. His fishing camp with Dr. Little and Bob Hadaway was such a special place. I was perfectly content just riding in Pawpaw's boat. He tried his hardest to teach old Megan how to bait a line and fish, but was also okay with me staying on the boat and not talking so much that I didn't scare the fish away. Pawpaw always wanted to be the first out on the water, and to do so he would wake up around 3 so he could launch the boat by 4 or 4:30 at the latest. I remember thinking back then, and I'm still as convinced, the fish were still asleep. I would sleep on the boat. I remember the first time he took us out to see the rodeo at the end of the day. I just couldn't understand what kind of rodeo Pawpaw was talking about on the water. But this is when you would sit on the dock and watch people come off the water. There were some that could do this with ease, like my Pawpaw, but some clearly had never backed up a trailer. I don't know how many boats were torn up, but we got a kick out of it because that was something everyone should see. When I started showing pigs, Miss Tilly's Hunting Club would be in attendance. I always hoped it would be them or just my Pawpaw announced as the buyer. I always loved the fact that I was the same age as Granny Joe and Pawpaw's anniversary. I felt like I was the living representation in time of their marriage. I have so many memories of trips, events, and holidays, but just the small stuff, like when the 4 wild Indians, aka Blake, Macy, Brandon, and Lexi, had figured out how there was a perfect lap going out Pawpaw and Granny Joe's front door, around the house, and onto the back patio, in through the back door, through the living room where Pawpaw could be found in his recliner watching news, and would do this over and over. Those 4 ran laps around the house, slammed doors, and drove everyone nuts, but from his chair, Pawpaw constantly told them to stop. That still sticks out in my mind. Or when we got together and Pawpaw got his pit going, and he took out his long slab of meat on the island of the kitchen, cutting the best tenderloins ever, sticking the toothpicks in, cooking them way better than any restaurant, sitting down and eating with Granny Joe and Pawpaw and thinking, this is so good. And hearing Pawpaw confirm this, if you would listen to him saying, mm-hmm, while he ate so quietly, you had to listen though. Or sometimes he would flat out say, and excuse me, but I'm going to quote him here. He would say, now that's damn good. Pawpaw loved good food, homemade pie, and red wine, but he loved Crown more. In later years, he could not understand why you had to wait so long to get a Crown at the restaurant, as though they should just know. Pawpaw wanted to walk through the door, sit down at a restaurant, and magically his Crown just appear on the table. And heaven forbid if it got empty. The waiter should know that yes, he did want another one. I've had to grasp some very hard realities within the past several years, and through life-changing events, I became not only a mother, but a single mother. And for me, that also made it hit home just what kind of a decision a step-parent makes. I've always known that Pawpaw was a good man. However, the last few years really hit home for me just how great of a person Pawpaw is. Choosing to love my grandmother, who had 5 children of her own, and now being in the same situation as myself. They were a real-life Brady Bunch since Pawpaw added our bow to our family. One of the last days that I saw Pawpaw, leaning in, I whispered to him, "You're about to go where your glass of Crown never gets empty and the fish are always biting. If you are a person that enjoys a drink every now and then, have your next Crown and think of Pawpaw. But if you're a fisher, think of Pawpaw the next time you throw the perfect cast, because the Lord knows I always made a bird's nest." I want to leave you with this. It's a Bible verse I found during a low part of my life in 2016, and recently I found the same exact paper I wrote it on. It comes from Revelation 21, verse 4. He will wipe away every tear from your eyes, and there will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, because the former things have gone away.
All right, I want to thank y'all for staying, first off. I'm going to back up a minute. I want to thank y'all for coming. On behalf of the family, this means so much to us that not everybody was able to come and stay this long. I don't know how much longer we're going to be here. Papa told me to keep my speech down to an hour and a half to 2 hours. Because he said this might be the last time some of you ever think about him again. I don't know. But here's the deal. If we're here much longer, knowing the Catholic Church, now that most of them are gone, they're going to start passing an offering plate around. So we do need to kind of speed it up a little bit. I'm going to tell y'all right now, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Denny Buckaloo. I'm one of Pawpaw's 4 son-in-laws. I am the favorite son-in-law. But if you know the other 3, you know the bar is not set real high. So anyway, Pawpaw, he was always smiling. He had that smile on his face that put a little twinkle in his eyes, right? Kind of made you wonder what he was up to. I mean, he was always stirring that pot. He was always making sure everyone around him was having a good time. So let's talk about this. Let's see what kind of man he was. All right, here was a man who owned his own business, a very successful business. He had a young son, yet he needed something else. He could have gotten a dog. He could have got a boat. But he probably already had a boat, and he probably didn't want a dog. So Pawpaw decided to get married. All right, and he didn't marry anybody. He married a woman that had 5 kids. I'm sure some people thought he was crazy. Hadaway was probably one of them. But here's the deal. By the time the wedding rolled around on December 23rd of 1983, one of those kids already had 2 children of her own. 3 of them were in college. The 5th one was in high school. And when you add Bo in there, that's 6 kids and 2 grandkids. Yeah, he probably was a little crazy. But when he married Jo, he didn't marry her. He married the whole family. From day one, they were a family. He took the family on trips, provided jobs, gave them a place to live, provided food, cars, whatever it took. Why? Because they were his family. That's the kind of person he was. That December night became pretty special for me as well. After the wedding, some of the guests went to Club Daniels here in town, and that's the night that Melanie and I had our first dance. I think the song was Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. Of course, that was my lifestyle. I was always looking for love in all the wrong places. But little did I know that that night would change my life. That dance would change my life. By the time the summer of 1984 rolled around, trust me, I was in full courting mode, right? David and Mary Jo had the condo that we've talked about on the lake. So it made for great family gatherings. Although I must admit, the first time I went there, it's kind of shocking. Picture this. I walk in, and here's Mary Jo in a 2-piece swimsuit. Okay, you know, I told you, I'm in courting mode here. So in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, let's look ahead 25 years. That's what Melanie's going to look like in 25 years. I can live with that, right? Well, then I go outside, and I meet David. I was not expecting to see my future father-in-law sporting a Speedo. But he was. A little shocking at first, but I was like, okay, that's okay. I can handle that. But then I had an image. It was not a good image. It was a bad image. And I could not get this image out of my head of seeing what Bo was going to look like wearing a Speedo 30 years later. Trust me, it's not a pretty picture. All right, Trace, Jace, and Case. y'all need to make sure I never see that image in full life, okay? That's y'all's responsibility from now on. As the summer progressed, and I met the rest of the Melanie siblings and got to know them, just as David did, I too fell in love with the entire family. All right? I had to find a way to be a part of this family. All right? Trust me, I was so glad when Melanie said yes. Because what if she would have said no? What would I have done? Novella was already married. Well, Rebecca and Dwayne, they were pretty set. Tony and Bo just weren't my type. Who's that leave? Stephanie. I mean, I would have asked her to go out with me if Melanie would have said no. I want to be a part of that family so bad. But thank God Melanie said yes. Also, thank God for Tom. You see, there's 15 years difference between mine and Melanie's wedding and Stephanie and Tom's wedding. That's why I want to know what year y'all got married. All right? The guys in the family, meaning me, Paw, Dwayne, Teddy, Tony, and Bo, had discussed several times over those 15 years who was going to take in Stephanie. When Tom showed up, Paw called us all together, and he said, guys, we're on a code of silence. Do not tell any Stephanie stories. We were afraid Tom would tuck tail and run. Paw was the leader in this group because he would say, guys, I've already had her for 20 years. It's somebody else's turn to take her now. So Tom fell in love with the entire family too, and Stephanie was the only one left. So there you have it. All right, but David was a huge reason why Tom and I fell in love with this family. As I've mentioned, he was always smiling, always laughing. Well, maybe not always laughing. You see, Pawpaw loved to aggravate his grandkids. He would grab them, he would pick them up, he would tickle the bottom of their feet. He just loved to aggravate and pick on them. He did that every chance he got. One time, here's Pawpaw, right? He's laid back in his chair. He's taking him in a little nap. His feet are wide, in plain sight, and Brandon was probably about 4 years old. So Brandon decided to get even. Brandon tiptoes up to Pawpaw real quiet and begins to tickle Pawpaw's feet. Well, Pawpaw took a little offense to being woken up like that. He sat up real quick and he began to scold Brandon, and I'm going to tell you what, Brandon, all 4 years old of him, did not miss a beat. He didn't flinch, and he looked at Pawpaw and said, Pawpaw, you're just a big fat baby. Well, immediately, Pawpaw knew he had been had by a 4-year-old. And here came the grin, and here came the laughter. All right, and what about the Christmases we've had? I don't know exactly which Christmas it was, but there was a Christmas in the condo. All right, does anyone remember those big wicker chairs? Right, they had that circle deal. They were built almost like an eggshell, the inside of an eggshell. Well, they weren't real sturdy. Very poor design, if you ask me. I think this chair might swivel and turn, but I don't think it would rock. Well, somehow I managed to tip that chair over sideways right into the Christmas tree with me still in it. All right, so picture this. Here's the tree, here's the chair, here I am, on my legs, up in the air. I can't move. All right, everyone in that room is laughing so hard, but no one is laughing harder than Pawpaw. You know, I had to clean this up a little bit because I can say it now that the priest and everybody's gone. There were drinks involved, okay? But still, no one was laughing harder than Pawpaw, and no one would come help me. Anytime someone got up to help me, they started laughing again, and they just stopped in their tracks. And of course, when they all realized I couldn't help myself, they laughed even harder. You didn't have the little phone cameras back then, so everyone had to get their little digital cameras out and take pictures while old Din's here laid up next to the Christmas tree, right? And Pawpaw just kept laughing, and there is a picture of that somewhere. And that's who Pawpaw was. He just laughed all the time. What about the other Christmas? Maybe the same one, I don't know. Dwayne and I started talking about who was the best skier. Well, we went up to each other for about 30 minutes. And I think we had the phone in our hand making flight reservations to go to Colorado the next day to settle this little argument before Melanie and Rebecca stopped us. The entire time, Pawpaw would sit there and laugh at us. And each time he thought we were done, he would take a little jab at one of us. He might say, hey, Pennington, I think old Buckaloo can take you. I'd say, "Dadgum right, I can take him. You need to listen to Pawpaw is what you need to do." Well, of course, Dwayne, he wasn't going to settle for that, so he'd say, "Pawpaw, I can see faster backwards than he can go forwards." And then Dwayne, thinking he's Larry Mahan all over again, he pumped that old chest out and said, "I'm a bull rider. I ain't going to let no skinny little basketball player out-ski me." All right, well, immediately I'd say, "Well, I've never seen a bull on skis before, so I think I can take you this time." And here Pawpaw go again. He knew he'd just stirred that pot just enough to keep us going. And he laughed and laughed and laughed. And that's what Pawpaw liked to do. All right, the hunting stories that we've heard about that Pawpaw loved to tell. There was one after an extremely successful hunt. They might have been a tad bit over their limit. All right, so they had a dilemma. How do we get all these birds back to Conroe without getting arrested? I mean, here's grown men, and this is the best plan they could think of. They put the birds in an ice chest and put the ice chest in the trunk of Mary Jo's Mercedes. She's driving back to Conroe by herself. Their thought was that even if she did get pulled over by a game warden or DPS, no one would suspect that this cute little lady in a Mercedes traveling by herself would have 100 birds in the trunk of her car. Well, I think she did. All right. And every time David would tell that story, he would grin and laugh. And every time we heard it, we would all laugh too. Stories about his world cruise, going to Victoria Falls, Seychelles, and the Polynesian Islands, and how beautiful everything was, and how he really loved that trip. He always had a smile talking about that cruise. Novella was laughing the other day when Pawpaw and Granny Joe, was it the Taj Mahal? They're at the Taj Mahal. They wouldn't let Pawpaw in for some reason. Why? Because Pawpaw's wearing shorts. All right, well, what he had to do, he had to put on a sarong. All right, now boys, that's a little skirt. Okay, it's like a swimsuit cover-up. All right, so picture Pawpaw standing in front of the Taj Mahal with his shorts and his little skirt on. Okay, but Pawpaw just laughed whenever he'd see that picture too. All right, last story I want to tell you about is about a football game. All right, see, Pawpaw began to cheer for A&M because he had 5 children and a couple of grandchildren graduate from there. All right, well, he also began cheering for Baylor because that's where I went to college, and 2 of his grandchildren, and like Megan said, today a great-grandchild is graduating from Baylor. And if Pawpaw was ever going to go to a college football game with me, we were going to Waco. The game I want to talk about was in 2011, Baylor versus Oklahoma. It was Blake's sophomore year. Baylor was just now beginning to make strides winning football games again. In fact, the year before, Baylor had gone to their first bowl game in 16 years. That's a long time to go without being able to win 6 games in a season. Anyway, Pawpaw also loved to see Oklahoma and their, no preachers in here, their arrogant asshole coach, Bob Stoops. He loved to see them lose, right? So at the time, Oklahoma was ranked number 5. Baylor had just entered the rankings, and they were ranked number 22. Well, the game went back and forth, neck and neck, a nail-biter. I'm telling you, a very fast-paced game. I looked up the game recap. Both teams combined to have 7 touchdown drives in 5 plays or less. All right, so think about that. You were never comfortable with the lead, but you also knew you were never out of it if you were behind. So yes, it was exciting, a little nerve-wracking too. It could have gone either way. Through the first 3 quarters, the score was never more than 7 points difference. At the end of the 3rd quarter, Baylor was up 31-24. Now let me set the stage. Early in the 4th quarter, Baylor scored to go up by 14 points. We were ecstatic, to say the least. Y'all with me? Y'all visioning this? We were fired up. We were on cloud 9. But here comes Oklahoma. They scored with just under 6 minutes left to make it a 7-point game again. Then what happens? They score again with 51 seconds left, and they tie the game at 38-38. After the kickoff, Baylor gets the ball on their own 20-yard line. Remember, there's 51 seconds left showing on the clock. A field goal from either team wins the game. We need a minimum of 50 yards, probably more like 60, to get a legitimate shot at a field goal. All right? And we can't afford a turnover down there, right? They kick a field goal, we lose. All right, are you following me? Y'all got the picture? All right, well, here we go. We run 4 plays, and we've made it across midfield to our 34-yard line. A field goal from there would be 51 yards, and probably too risky to attempt in case it got blocked. All right, no one in that stadium is sitting down. No one is being quiet. It's loud. And I mean, let's imagine the atmosphere. Let's imagine it was your team. Okay, let's imagine it was A&M, or let's imagine it was Texas, or let's imagine Texas Tech, or let's imagine even East Carolina over here, Mr. Clem. Wherever it is, if this was your team, you would be ecstatic too. But guess what? That day, Baylor was everybody's team. Everybody wanted Baylor to beat Oklahoma. Everybody in the conference, A&M was still in the conference, Texas, of course, Texas Tech. Everybody wanted Baylor to win. The whole country was pulling for Baylor. All right, so let's go back. They set the change, 1st and 10. They start the clock on our own 34-yard line. All right, no timeouts. 23 seconds, 22 seconds, 21 seconds. We line up with 3 receivers on the right, 1 on the left, empty backfield. Robert Griffin III lines up in the shotgun. Clock continues to run. You got the picture? All right. Here's what needs to happen. Griffin either needs to scramble for 5 or 10 yards and get out of bounds, or he needs to throw a completion, and that guy needs to get out of bounds. Or he throws an incomplete pass to stop the clock, or we throw a touchdown. Those are our only options. Anything else happens, we probably don't have enough time to get set and run another play. You understand that scenario, right? If we go to overtime, we may not win. This is our chance to beat Oklahoma for the first time in probably 20 years. It was a big deal for Baylor. All right, here's what happens. 20 seconds, 19 seconds, 18 seconds. Griffin takes the snap with 17 seconds counting down. He gets it. He looks right. He looks left. He scrambles. He goes to his left. He throws it clear across the field to the back corner of the end zone. What happens? Baylor's Terrence Williams catches the football. Touchdown Baylor. Touchdown Baylor, right? 8 seconds are left on the clock. Pure adrenaline rush. We're sitting in the suite. There's probably 18 of us in there. You talk about going nuts. I'm hugging Melanie. I'm hugging Blake. I'm hugging Brandon. I'm hugging Granny Joe. I'm hugging Pawpaw. Everybody else in that suite. We are ecstatic, right? You know what I'm talking about. Well, somehow I look up and I catch a glance at Pawpaw. He has the biggest grin on his face. He is laughing so hard watching us, taking it all in. And I will never, ever forget that image, Phil. I see pure pride and pure joy in his face. I didn't realize it at the time, but later I understood his pride and I understood his joy. And it wasn't because Baylor won. And it wasn't because Oklahoma lost. It was pure pride and joy watching his family, watching me, Melanie, Blake, and Brandon be so happy and be so excited and be so overjoyed over a damn football game. All right? But that was Pawpaw, right? That's who he was. And for me, that moment summed up Pawpaw's life. He worked hard, sure he did. He had some setbacks, right? But I believe the only thing he truly ever wanted was for his family, Mary Jo, Bo, Tiffany, Novella, Teddy, Tony, Judy, Rebecca, Dwayne, Melanie, myself, and Stephanie and Tom. The only thing he really ever wanted, all of his grandkids in there, the only thing he wanted was for us to be happy. All right, if we were happy, he was laughing. If we were laughing, he was smiling. All right, if we were celebrating something and if we were having a good time, then trust me, Pawpaw could sit back and he could smile, and he could laugh, and He could aggravate, and he could do all this because he knew all was good in his life. All right? That's the person he was, and that's the reason why we all loved him so much. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate it, and I know my family does too. To my hero, my dad, William David Choate, better known as Pawpaw for the last 40 years or so. Dad was born in 1939 in Port Neches, Texas. Graduated from Port Neches Groves High School in 1957. I can always remember that because when he would tell the story, he would always make the comment that the rich kid in school drove a brand new 1957 Chevy convertible. And I tell you that because Dad came from little means. So he joined the United States Navy for a better opportunity. Dad spent his time on the East Coast in New York and on the West Coast in San Diego learning his trade as a dental technician. He worked as a short order cook for extra money, hustled his pool game at local bars. I'm pretty sure he won quite a bit, not just because he said so, because even in his 70s, he would run the table on you if you put money down. When Dad got out of the Navy, he made his way home to Texas, started Choate Ceramic Lab in Orange, Texas. He then made his way to Conroe, where he started his family and worked on building his legacy. Dad was the textbook definition of a workaholic. His natural alarm clock would go off at 3:30 a.m. 7 days a week and was usually at the lab by 4:30 making coffee and starting his day. As a teenager, I would always give him a hard time about getting up so early, and I would say, "I'm never going to do that." Well, some years later, he made a point to remind me of what I had said back then and pointed out that I was doing just the same. I know he was proud to see that his examples were paying off. Dad's lifelong passion was hunting and fishing. He loved to shoot a shotgun and catch whatever was biting. He bought me my first shotgun when I was 4 years old, and I had a rod in my hand well before that. Growing up, we fished fresh water all the time till I was about 8 or 9 years old. And then we started fishing saltwater. Dad loved wade fishing the Texas Gulf Coast, Port O'Connor to Port Mansfield. As Dad got older, he started doing more drift fishing and poling from his tower on his boat for redfish and trout in the shallows from Pringle Lake to the lower Laguna Madre. He was in heaven when he was able to be on the water doing just that. So I'm sure he's looking down on us today from heaven, drifting across the bay in his boat with a 5 to 10 mile an hour wind out of the southeast, throwing a pumpkin seed with a chartreuse tail or a silver spoon, with that great big smile, just waiting on us to join him one day in eternal greatness and happiness. I guess what I really want y'all to know about my dad, and I've heard a lot about him so far, but my dad was a super hard worker. And he worked super hard to take care of his family and helped put 6 kids through college. The majority of that money went to Texas A&M, which he was so proud of and was so happy to do so because he never had that opportunity. Dad really wanted to go to dental school and be a dentist, but he made the best of what he had, and that was Dad. I'm just so proud of my dad because he helped so many people and left this place better than he found it. What came with that working hard was playing hard. I used to ask him from time to time when we would leave to go on a fishing or hunting trip, Dad, you think we're going to kill anything on our trip? Or you think we're going to catch a bunch of fish? I guess I was excited about going, but just wanted to know his thoughts about the moon, the wind, the tides, the temperature, etc. And he gave me all that. But what he always ended with was, I'm not sure, son, but the worst thing that's going to happen is we're going to have a good time. And that was Dad. He just enjoyed life. I'm so very thankful that we have some of our very close friends and family here today that got to spend great many weekends and times with him, enjoying each other and the common bond we had together. In 2015, Dad had been retired for 15 years. He and Mary Jo had been around the world on a 3-month cruise, enjoyed an African safari with Novella and Teddy, was part of the Airstream Club, and traveled all over the United States, attended many other family vacations, and all kinds of grandkids activities. But he quit fishing, traveling, and started slowing down, and honestly stayed in his chair most all day watching Fox News. So what I failed to mention before is that Dad was never late for anything. And if you made him late, he was pissed. He ran his daily schedule and his business like the military. We talked, and I told him I was going to start a new company. I think he was more excited than I was. The day we opened the doors, he beat me to the office. I rolled over the railroad tracks at I-45 in Hicks, and there was his truck. And my first thought was, he's back. He's back to help, to teach, to coach, to mentor, to advise, talk business, work on trucks, load trucks. He had no knowledge of what we were doing. He just wanted to help and learn. But he made sure to let me know when I pulled up in the parking lot at 5 a.m. that morning that I was late because he was 45 minutes early. So a few years went by. He came every day to the yard. So he's about 77. And my youngest sister, Stephanie, calls me and says, hey, your dad's crawling up on those trucks and it's 12 foot tall and he's going to fall and hurt himself. My first thought was, you're right. My second thought was, then maybe you need to come down here and tell him that, because I'm going to be the ass end of that conversation. And as I suspected, he got his feelings hurt when we told him he no longer could crawl up on the trucks. But about the same time, we had just landed a job in West Texas, and I was ordering some FR safety gear and some gas monitors and doing some final count on employees, and for an order of 6. And he come in my office, we were talking about it, and he said, well, what about mine? And I said, Dad, I didn't think you would go. He said, West Texas is 8 hours away. We're going to be out there a long time. And he said, you're damn right I'm going to go. You better order 7. I said, okay. He went. He attended every morning safety meeting. But of course he did, because he made coffee every morning. He woke up the whole crew to make sure they were on time and no one was late. He wore his hard hat, his safety gear. He was out of his element being in the oil field. But every person on those job sites loved him to death, and he helped every way he could and enjoyed every moment of it. As time went on, I started seeing signs of Dad's memory slipping. And that's when he started slowing down, and he told me he was going to step back because he felt he was in the way. It was one of the toughest things he ever told me, but I did understand. He continued to stop by the yard on a daily basis, just to watch the trucks come through and check on things. Dad always wanted to make sure everyone was taking care of business first. So every time we would get off the phone, he would say, go take care of your doings, which meant go take care of your business. That's what we're going to do, Dad. We're going to take care of our doings while carrying on your name and legacy. Dad, you're my rock. I love you. And you fought to the end like a true warrior. I'd like to end with this. My dad was a great man. You heard that all day today. He was a great father to me, provider, husband to his wife, Mary Jo, of 39 and a half years. Would have been 40 on December to the 23rd of this year. Father to my sisters, my brother. Father-in-law to my brother-in-laws, sister-in-law, and my wife. We love you, Dad. You're my hero. God bless your soul in eternity with Jesus. I'll see you soon. I love you.